Okay, it is 3 o'clock. If you hop on and you're a little bit late, just a quick reminder, or if you're reviewing this or rewatching this, you can ask questions in the chat. So when I get done covering the topics that I wanted to cover today, what I'll do is I'll go back and I'll answer any questions that pop up in the chat. I'm very sorry I'm eating because I'm trying to squeeze in a 3 o'clock meal. And I'm going to do a little quick plug for what I'm eating right now. If you can see this in the video, this is what I'm eating. Now, I did not have time to cook today for my 3 o'clock meal. I didn't have anything prepared today. So this was in the freezer, and I keep a few in the freezer for a case of emergency. Happy Foodie, you get these at Walmart. This came from Walmart and King in the freezer section. And it's just a little microwavable bowl. It's got 7 net carbohydrates. It's got a lot of good fiber, lots of protein, very high protein, 28 grams. For such a small quantity, this is loaded with protein, and only 5 grams of sugar. What I dislike about this is there are some processed ingredients, including some of the dairy that's in this. So it's not ideal. It's not perfect. I'd rather have just some lean meats and fresh vegetables in a 4-to-1 ratio. But in a pinch, this is really nice, and it's kid friendly. My daughter really likes these. They have a lot of different varieties. So if you want to pick some of these up and try them for quick meals, this is not enough in terms of quantity to be a what I would call a medium to large size meal. It's a small meal. So for like a 3 o'clock in between my noon meal and my dinner, this is a perfect quantity. So today is Saturday, 18th, and let's take a look at the topics that I'm going to cover. Now, there were so many topics in check-ins this week that I split it up into 2 chunks, and the first topics will be covered in this session. And the reason for this, I was afraid I was going to go over my 40-minute limit that Zoom has given me without upgrading to a professional account, which is kind of expensive. So the topics I'm going to cover here are boosting protein without adding fat, because it's a really, really frequent question that I get. And Jennifer touched on it last week, so I'm going to reiterate a couple of things that she said. And then 2, defining progress. 3, staying on track in vacation season. And then the other topics that I got from check-ins through this week are going to be covered in a podcast episode. And so I don't actually have a podcast that's hosted publicly or anything, but what I did was when I had a few free minutes during this week, I sat down and just recorded audio answering these topics or these questions. So dietary sources of calcium and calcium supplements, you'll hear me talking about that if you listen to the podcast episode. When exercise is too much, so I'll touch on overtraining, which is a very good question that I got. And I'll give you some anecdotal examples where people I know have been the victim of or suffered from overtraining. It's a real thing, and it's not too difficult to get to that point. So it's a good discussion. Why I dislike corn and other grains, because people ask me that frequently. That may be a little redundant for those of you who've been around for a while, but worth reiterating. And then 7, or lastly, opinions on sweeteners. So I got a question about the best sweeteners to use for if you're having, or if you enjoy baking, you're doing baked goods or sweet treats as rewards here and there, that sort of thing. So those are what you'd find in the podcast. That's going to be linked. I think what I'm going to do is start a separate group chat area. And if you'd like to get access to podcast episodes, which are just audio that you could listen to while you're commuting or in the car or running or jogging or walking or whatever you do for exercise, let me know. I'll add you to that page. I'm not going to add everybody unless it's requested, because I don't want to bombard you with all these different group chat areas and get notifications and that kind of thing. So let's dive right into number 1 for today's topics: boosting protein without adding fat. Now, last week, Jennifer showed us this macro cheat sheet. Now, the purpose of this cheat sheet is to show you the difference between single macro foods and multiple macro foods. And it's a triple Venn diagram. It's really useful because you can see at the top, these are food items that are going to be mostly protein. In blue are food items that are going to be mostly carbs. In red are food items that are mostly fat. Now, that doesn't mean that if you eat an avocado, you're not getting any carbohydrates. That's not true. There's fiber in avocado, which is by definition in the carbohydrate category. But it's mostly fat, just like butter, egg yolks, oil, etc. are mostly fat. So when you're needing to boost one specific area, you go to one of these colors. If you're needing to boost protein, you're going to go to green. If you're needing to boost carbs, you're going to go to blue. If you need to boost fat, you're going to go to red. And these other items are combinations. So a protein bar, for example, which is not something I recommend eating on a regular basis, it is a mix of protein, carbs, and fats, and usually not in very good ratios. And that's one of the reasons I don't recommend them. Most protein bars that you'd pick up at like a GNC or even a gas station, the convenience stores have them. They have a lot of carbohydrates, and they come from processed, refined grain products. And so, you're not really getting a complete nutrition, and you're getting a lot of negative, components in there. So a couple of things. I had several requests to be able to access this cheat sheet in a format that's printable. The best way I know to do a printable format is to provide a PDF. And so if you go to the resources group chat area, you'll find a bunch of static links that are there permanently. It's not a place where chat happens. There's no interaction or alerts or anything, or there shouldn't be, but you'll find a link to that PDF that allows you to print it. And I may at some point, since this looks like it's been cropped, I may create something similar to this that's a little bit more inclusive of more food types. This is by no means exhaustive. It's just some common examples of macro or single macro foods and multi-macro foods, but it can be helpful for you. And so I had some tips on boosting protein without adding extra fats. And the number one thing that you can do is going to be to prioritize lean meats when you're planning your meals. Fatty meats are going to make hitting targets for protein and fat kind of tough. And a really good example of this that I see a lot is sausage, breakfast sausage. Hey, Ashley. If you can hear me, I said, hey, I don't know, but I saw that you popped in there. But so sausage is a really good example of a fatty meat that makes it tough to hit both protein and fat targets. And it's also a processed meat product that goes through extensive processing. And anything that falls into that category that's either processed or cured, which tends to be your breakfast foods like sausage and bacon and ham, are going to be considered unfavorable. Since we had somebody pop in here, I wanted to remind you, if you have a question, what I'm doing now is covering some topics that were requested throughout the week. And if you have a question, just add that to the chat, and I'll come back to the chat after I've covered these topics, and we'll answer those questions in detail. So boosting protein without adding fat. Number one tip, prioritize lean meats when you're planning your meals. Now, what are lean meats? If you look in this green section, anything that's primarily a protein-only macro or a single macro protein source is going to be a very lean meat or a lean protein product like egg whites. But chicken breast, turkey breast, egg whites, those are your top three single macro meats. They're primarily protein and very little fat. So bison and buffalo fall into this category, but they're kind of tough to find unless you shop regularly at places like Whole Foods or import meats. Turkey bacon is an okay option. It is processed. It gets cut up into tiny pieces and then molded into forms before you find it in the grocery store. But if you can get uncured turkey bacon or uncured pork bacon for that matter, you're better off as a product in terms of processed meats. But you can get extra lean beef, but any red meat's going to have some percentage of fat. The good thing about extra lean beef and any beef really is you cook a lot of that fat out. If you drain that fat away, you're left with primarily protein. But the red meats are particularly tough to eliminate the cholesterol component, which is a fat. So my recommendation for red meat is no more than once or twice a week. And that's simply because it's pretty well known from clinical studies that red meat contributes to issues with cholesterol. Anything that contributes to the potential for atherosclerosis is very bad for your cardiovascular health. And I'm going to touch on something else related to that in just a minute, related to cognitive health and dementia. So fat-free cheese is a good way to boost protein and other forms of fat-free dairy like yogurt. So your fermented dairy products are pretty good for boosting protein without adding fat. So the second tip is use non-fat protein sources with your snacks. And the best way that I do that personally is by using fermented dairy, which is the fat-free cheeses and the non-fat yogurt. So if you've been working with me for very long, you know I use non-fat Greek yogurt. I load it up with chia seeds to make sort of a chia pudding, and that's a pretty common snack for me. That's mostly protein with a little bit of added fat from the chia seeds. But so again, we're talking about boosting protein without adding fat, which can be tricky to do. But first, prioritize those lean meats. Second, use non-fat protein sources with your snacks. All right, moving on to the next topic that I was really wanted to cover in today's session is defining progress. So it's not uncommon for someone to ask the question, or to pose this question like this: I'm hitting my targets, but I'm not losing the kind of weight that I hoped, and I'm not seeing the kind of lost inches that I hoped. And so I want to just cycle back to this idea of what healthy progress and healthy loss really is. And this may be redundant, and if it is, I apologize. But this is a graph, and I wanted to just pose this question and see if you can guess the time frame that this graph depicts. And if you're watching the replay, just take a second and determine how long you think this graph took to create. So we got a lot of data points. We're going from about 275 down to 240. So roughly 35 pounds of weight loss. And so the answer is this is about 8 months. Now, this is unusual and might be shocking to some people who have experience with fad diets where you drop 10 pounds in a week. But we have to understand that that drop of 10 pounds is not coming from fat tissue. And what we want to do with this program with healthy weight loss is have that loss come from fat tissue. Also, this is a little shot of 1.09 pounds per week. And I'm telling people all the time, healthy weight loss is defined as anywhere from 0.5 to 1 or 1.25-ish pounds per week. If you are achieving that or getting close to that, even in the low range of that, which would be a half a pound a week, your weight loss is coming primarily from fat. And I know that from the data analysis. And that's healthy loss. If you're losing anything other than fat, which includes muscle tissue, bone mineral density, connective tissue, those things are not things we want to lose. We want to retain those. Of course, we need to have strong bones. We need to have strong, elastic connective tissues, and we want to have plenty of lean mass. All those things contribute to your ability to have longevity in this life. So your ability to age without risk of balance issues and fractures associated with that, and osteoarthritis and those kinds of things. The more lean mass and the more dense our bones are, the healthier we're going to be as we age. And so that's one reason that you don't want to lose anything other than fat. The other reason is if you're losing tissue that's not fat, your endocrine system tends to freak out. The hormone balance becomes depressed and weight loss becomes really difficult, which at that point, that's called a plateau. People stop dieting, all the weight rushes back in because they resume normal eating, but their metabolism doesn't catch up until months later. That's why you have yo-yo dieting, where people lose a lot of weight really quickly, and then it all comes back really quickly and usually overshoots the weight where they began. So again, the point is defining progress requires that you look at this data and trust that what I'm saying is the truth. So this is a definition of healthy weight loss. If you're achieving at least half a pound per week on average, you're making ideal progress. If you're achieving 1 pound per week on average, you're achieving greater than ideal weight loss. And we can be confident that the losses are coming from fat, which is really, really important. Okay, now here's the body fat graph that went with the weight chart. And so you can see this individual went from about 58, 59% body fat down to now we're at 48, 49% body fat. So it's a 10% reduction in body fat in an 8-month period, which I think is around 30%, 0.3% per week. My ideal definition of fat loss is going to be 0.5% per week, anywhere from 0.5 to 1% per week. So that's just shy of what I would consider ideal. And then in areas like this, where you see the body fat didn't change for a period of 3 weeks, that would be an area where I'm concerned about, changing macronutrient targets. I'm pretty sure we did change at this point, and then there the progress resumed. So this process that I use it's proven. It works really well. You just have to trust it, and you have to commit to compliance. And that's one of the things that I really wanted to talk about. So first, this question: is it possible to hit your targets and not see adequate progress? The answer to that is absolutely. Of course, that's possible. So what does that mean? It means that, if you're not seeing at least 0.5 pounds of average loss week to week, we haven't quite dialed in the targets that suit your unique genome. The genome refers to your genetic makeup. So every person's different. And to be truthful, we don't hit the targets perfectly right out of the gate every time. Sometimes I do that, and it's really cool when that happens. However, for most people, it's a discovery process. So how do you fix this? If we're not where we need to be in terms of dialing in the targets, we just make simple adjustments until the progress does become what we want it to be. It becomes optimized. So it's a discovery process. Sometimes it can take several weeks to months. For me, myself, when I first started counting macronutrients in order to really dial in my nutrition as well as I could, it took me about 4 or 5 months to get to a point where I was making consistent or seeing consistent fat loss. And seeing the definition in muscle tone that I was wanting to see, and that sort of thing. But the best way to speed up progress is to do what your coach asks you to do consistently. So without that key component, which I refer to as compliance, you can't really know if your targets are working or not. And also, if you do start hitting the targets and you've only done that consistently for 2 or 3 weeks, it's not really reasonable to expect big changes necessarily during that time period. So consistency is really key. Another example is of the importance of consistency is if let's say you have a week where every day of the week you're on target, and I'm high-fiving you every morning when I see that, or doing the little celebration emoji. And then on the weekend, the wheels fly off and you lose that control, and you blow your targets out of the water. Or you're way under your targets because you're so busy, you fail to eat. The progress can be affected by that. And so one weekend falling off the wagon is not going to hurt you. But when it's a pattern of progress during the week, failure during the weekend, that cycles, you have 3 to 4 weeks of that where you feel like you're hitting your targets, but really you're not. You're cycling between success and failure. 2 steps forward, 1 step back really becomes 1 step forward or half a step forward. So really we have to get compliance and participate collaboratively in the discovery process where we get to the point where progress is what it should be. And by the time you get there, for most people, you've built habits that are sustainable, and it can become something that is much easier to do once you do find it. But anyway, I wanted to talk about that because it's incredibly important. Now, the next topic was staying on track during vacation season. So we are in vacation season now. A lot of you have gone on vacation, and I've seen this question a few times, and I wish I would have answered it before now. But here are my tips. Don't stay anywhere that doesn't have a kitchen. So if it's in your control, if someone else isn't planning the vacation for you, make sure that at minimum you have a refrigerator where you can put foods and at least a microwave. And if you have those 2 things, then you can prep meals ahead of time and take them with you in a cooler. It's relatively easy to do that. Stick them in the fridge and then you pull them out as you need them. And you can easily, for 1 week, for just yourself, have 10 meals to take with you. And that covers your lunches. Probably would cover lunches for 2 people. Or 2 meals, 2 midday meals. Like if you do a noon and a 3, you'd have that with just 10 meals in the fridge. But ideally, you'd be outfitted with a kitchen for your normal cooking routine. Nothing has to change just because you're going on vacation. You can get fresh produce by finding out where the local markets are, or just a regular grocery store nearby. And so cooking for the family, for me, on vacation times is one of my favorite things to do because I don't have a time constraint. I'm used to having time constraints where I'm cooking in bulk at one point and, using that throughout the week, or I'm squeezing in a healthy meal after I get home at 5:30, before trying to get it in before 6:30. And the other thing about that is I really don't like eating out when I'm going on vacation. Usually we do a beach vacation. The crowds at restaurants are ridiculous, and so are the prices. So cooking for me, since I already enjoy cooking, is it's not a headache during vacation. But that's something that's, if you want to stay on track, it should become a priority, having that kitchen or at least a fridge and a microwave. The next thing, communicate your priorities. A lot of times people vacation with family or with extended family in some cases. So you should let your extended family know, you should have already let them know by now, what you're doing with nutrition, with your healthy lifestyle, and let them know that it's important to you. It's okay to demand respect from them in this area of your life, which is one of the most important areas of your life that exists. And it's okay to ask people specifically to avoid being negative about what you're doing. A lot of people will be negative about your attempt to be healthy because it's foreign to them and they don't understand it, and they don't have that priority, maybe because they don't struggle with weight, or they don't have other symptoms of poor nutrition like chronic pain, fatigue, insomnia, things like that. These are things that just really get on my nerves when someone's like, oh, come on, just let loose, it's just one time. Yeah, it could be just one time that spirals into 5 times, every night of your vacation, or 7 times every night of your vacation. And then you've ruined an entire month of hard work prior to that. So communicate your priorities and expect those priorities to be respected. Most people are going to be pretty understanding of that. The third thing for me that's important is to continue not just your morning routine, but any routines that you have related to nutrition. For me, the morning routine is incredibly important. It's important for me to be up before everybody else, to plan my day, to prioritize self-care, my exercise, my prayer and meditation time, planning not just for my nutrition, but also for what I want to accomplish during the day. That's part of my morning routine. Affirming with myself what I'm doing and the value of what I'm doing is part of my routine. And if I lose those things, if I go a day without that morning routine, I don't feel well. I feel like I'm rushed. I feel like I'm not prepared because I haven't put in the time that I know I need for planning purposes. And I don't start the day off setting the tone that I want to set, that I know is helpful. Starting with a morning routine where you're up and you prioritize what you know to be right for yourself, that sets the tone for the rest of the day as well. So putting that on pause for a vacation can really, really hurt you, especially if you've worked hard to build that routine, to build that habit. Habits are really, really tough to build and really, really easy to bust. And nothing proves that more easily than a vacation. It's hard to get back into a routine of any kind if you take an entire week off. Another part of starting the day off right is making sure that you get a healthy protein and fiber packed breakfast in the morning. And I usually recommend that people eat around 10 a.m. for their first meal. But this becomes really important if you're on a beach, because you're out there. It can be boring because you're just kind of relaxing. And most people, when they get bored, also like to eat. But if you add a little bit of hunger to that, then it's much easier to eat. And it's easier to eat the wrong things. So having protein and fiber at breakfast is going to help you get through that time, that downtime where you'd like to be snacking on something and it's tempting to snack on something improper. Speaking of that, staying hydrated will assist you with that. If you're, if you're going hiking, if you're, doing a mountain vacation, or doing something that's active, especially if you're sweating and you're, at the beach and it's 90 degrees with no breeze on the ocean. If you're dehydrated, you can interpret that as hunger. You can interpret that as specific cravings, and those things can really be can make nutritional progress messy. So staying hydrated is definitely key. Plan and pack snacks. This is my next tip. So when the protein and fiber from breakfast run out, you really need something healthy and convenient that you can reach for. For me, that looks like fresh vegetables, raw vegetables especially. You don't have to cook them. They're not going to go bad in a cooler. Yogurt snacks, if you've got a really good cooler, are an okay option. Loaded up with some grain-free granola, chia seeds, fresh fruit like blueberries are a perfect additive for a yogurt snack. You can make a little parfait and have that on the beach. They're easy to grab. They don't make a mess. And so that can get you between meals when you're away from the kitchen, when you're away from the hotel room or the condo, wherever you're at. But you need to plan ahead for those and make sure that they are prepared so that you can grab them and go. And you're not having to prepare them the morning of, you're relaxing day on the beach or whatever. Now, the last thing I think is important is to plan to indulge a little bit. And people, you probably heard me talk about this before. You need to have a plan when you know you're going to stray from your routine. And if you plan for it, then you can better enjoy it. So log it in the food diary ahead of time. As usual, plan the rest of your day around that, and you can avoid feeling guilty because by the end of the day, you've still hit your targets. Maybe it was with a couple of unfavorable choices, but you've still hit the target. So the body's been fueled with proper ratios of nutrients. So I think if we can follow all those tips, vacation should be a breeze. You shouldn't come back any heavier or any larger in waist circumference, and you should be able to pick back up where you left off with everything that is important to you as far as how you fuel the body. So that is everything for what I wanted to cover today.